Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Modular. Today we're looking at the Pony VCO from Befaco. Why is it called the Pony? I don't think it's important. What is important is that it's an adorable, cute, mini compact analogue VCO with wavefolding, Thru-Zero FM modulation and a built-in VCA. It's the perfect little module for a small, compact little modular system. But of course it can hold its own anywhere. Sounds a bit like this. It's got a choice of 4 waveforms. You can tune it up and down either the entire range or down to an octave or down to a semitone. The timbre slider here is rather fantastic, and it also has an octave switch up and down. All really compact. This is also available in a 1U version, which is quite fascinating. So let me bring you in and have a look at what it can do. The Pony VCO then. You can see exactly how small it is compared to some of these other modules. I mean, this is the even VCO over here, Befaco's other VCO. And it is half the size. Half the size. Squeeze in there, you would miss it if you weren't looking for it. And that definitely makes it ideal for a compact system. This is only 60 HP here. But also you shouldn't discount it from being a completely valuable VCO in any situation. So what do we have? Well, rather than having individual outs for the waveforms, you have a single output down here. And then we can select between the 4 different waveforms via this little tiny switch at the side. Let's start with the sine wave. Now our knob here at the top can operate in a couple of different ways. You can either go full range, whoa, or you can switch it to become an octave, or a semitone, or if you prefer, knock it all the way over and it becomes an LFO. Just about up into audio rate. It's an interesting approach to tuning, only in as much as that you kind of expect it to hold its note as you move from one to the other. But it doesn't necessarily do that because the placement of the knob will be different depending on whether you're looking at an entire range or an octave or a semitone. And so initially it's slightly bewildering, I think, because it's like, you know, I'm going to tune this in and then tune this in and then move it to the next one, and the tuning has moved while you then tune that in. So it's a very useful thing, way of looking at it, something I'd not seen before. I don't know if that's, I mean, I guess it's saving space rather than having a coarse tune and a fine tune. It allows you to do it all on the same knob. My only fear is that as I move that switch, my finger tends to just stroke the knob a little bit, which is going to knock it out of tune if I'm trying to tune it in. But that is great for a good range of detuning, you know, once you've got it married in with something else. Anyway, moving on, the 4 waveforms then are sine, as we've seen, triangle, sawtooth, and then a square wave. Now, what you may have noticed is that it's completely disappeared. It's because our timbre slider here is all the way down. When you go to the square wave, this becomes pulse width modulation, and I, of course, turned it all the way to nothing. So what this is all about then is this timbre slider here. This is where all the action goes. This is what makes the Pony VCO something more than just a waveform generator. It then becomes a wave folding generator, a generator of folding waves. But of course on the square wave, as I said, this is purely pulse width modulation. So let's go back to our sine wave and let's see what happens. Well, that's just lovely. Triangle. It's really nice how that vanishes away and how it sort of rips into that edge. Sawtooth. It's interesting because the Sawtooth kind of does the opposite. It starts off edgy and then it folds itself into some nice little curves before then reasserting some edginess and then again finding mellowness. Lovely. So the last couple of bits of this is that it has a built-in VCA. So you don't need to have another VCA module alongside in order to run it, which again is great for compact modular setups. So what would you stick in here? Well, you could stick anything, but more commonly I suppose you would probably put in an envelope. But it does depend on what it is you want to do. If you want it to just warble to tremolo, then you could stick in an LFO. But normally speaking, we could stick in something which is going to give us an envelope to control the volume of the sound. Just out of shot, I'm using a Keystep 37 to fire envelopes and control the pitch and that do the sequencing side of things. Just in case you were wondering. So if we also plug in some pitch control into the voltage octave input. So if we put a little LFO into the timbre input, so I'll take the output number 2 from my quart here, we can do a little bit of voltage control. Alternatively, I could, rather than having it as a moving LFO, I could use that as an envelope also. And that way you get the same movement every time. So there's a vast range of possible sounds that you can pull out of the Pony VCO. This slider is just it's so playful, it's so tactile, it just makes you want to get in there and keep changing things. What I find with wavefolding is that it kind of replaces the need for a filter, because it's bringing in that change, it's bringing in that difference. Not to say that it's the same thing at all, but it's that movement, it's that modulation, it's that slight change to the timbre which is really interesting on the ears. And that's what wavefolding does. But let's run it through the filter as well, just to see how that affects things. So as I bring the filter in, that starts to take out all those edges again. So let's put some modulation onto the timbre. Of course, as we move over to the square wave, then that's just like any other square wave. Nice. This is lovely. I mean, what I'm getting from it is this ever moving, ever changing tone and timbre. I mean, usually I do that sort of thing with the filter, but it's fascinating how the wavefolding and the filtering kind of fights against each other. They're doing the opposite thing. You know, you wavefold to add edge to things, and then you filter to take that edge off. And the interplay between those two things is really quite fascinating. I mean, the square wave on the end of this is just fat and sounding fantastic through the wasp filter, but then the wasp filter does make things sound really chunky. But without a doubt, the Pony VCO has a nice fat square end to it. No trouble there at all. It's just this other stuff, the playfulness of the way that moves about, and the way it just keeps moving, keeps that interest, keeps your brain going, oh, well, no, there's something going on there, most certainly. It's really very, very interesting. I wish that swap between the waveforms is a little bit smoother, you know, because if you wanted to use that within and in performance, it's not always a completely easy switch to move, but hey, you know, maybe stick with the waveform that you're after. The octave switch here is really nice, being able to go up and down on that. That's great. All right, there's one or two more things yet to do. my the least favourite things, which is the Thru-Zero FM. But heck, let's have a look. So I've got another oscillator coming in from my main rack. And just take a moment to show how easily it is to detune this one to another oscillator because of that whole range you've got of a semitone, which is nice. But now they're more or less in tune, I'm going to stick that other oscillator straight up its Thru-Zero. So I've added the pitch from this to both oscillators. So there you go, that's pretty much everything on the Pony VCO. So let me plug it in and just play it a little bit more for a final bit of sound through both the filter and through a couple of effects, just to give it some pizzazz, some interest. What a nice little module. It's just an oscillator with wavefolding and a VCO built in. It's nice, it gives you a complete sound source within a small or larger rack. Befaco have managed to pack in a whole load of functionality into this little thing, and it's just super. The movement, I mean the sound through that filter, I mean obviously the filter is doing its thing too, but it's the timbre I really like. It's that tone as it changes. It's that movement. It's that subtle underbelly of folding and stuff like that. And it doesn't feel like it's weird and Buchler-esque. if you understand me. It feels more like pulse width modulation. It feels like it's there and is making things juicy rather than completely pulling things apart as wavefolding can sometimes do. So it feels within the sine waves and the triangle waves that they start off nice and round and they go edgy, but they don't go ballistic. They don't go crazy or into chaos. They just fold nicely to give you these edges that come and go as you modulate, or you can just dial in for a straightforward folded edgy waveform. The way it switches from the wavefolding to the pulse width modulation on the square wave is just slightly annoying, because you might often be somewhere on the timbre slider and then when you switch to square wave it disappears because it's the other end of a pulse. So, well, you just got to keep an eye on things and know where you're going, so that when you do make a change, if you're going to change to a big fat square wave, that you pull this down at the same time in order that you don't lose that waveform in the modulation. I think I was able to make some kind of melodic use of the Thru-Zero FM as well, which is quite exciting. I very rarely get to do anything useful through that sort of input. So I think it all comes down to trying harder, and as I do more of it and as I try more of it, maybe I'll somehow come across the way in which you can do it without having to have a Bastel pizza, which I do over there, which is definitely the best FM thing I've come across so far. But the fact that it's there is great. In the manual it explains it really quite well, in the fact that it's taking modulation, audio rate modulation with another oscillator through both the negative and the positive, rather than just summing it and getting a positive waveform as you generally do with FM, and then it sort of turns itself off when it goes negative. Don't know what I'm talking about? No, I don't either really, but in the manual it does go into some detail, which is very, very handy. Having the VCA built in there is very, very useful, although it's only of a particular one sort of type. You don't really have any control over it other than the CV that's going in. You've got no way to set the response. So it's simple, it's basic, it does a job, in the vast majority of cases, I suppose. But if you don't want to use that, then you can always just not have it plugged in and plug straight into some other VCA. But it's a very useful thing to have built in, because it saves you a whole other module in both space and cost, and so nice. And so overall I think the bizarrely named Pony VCO is a nice little thing. Good job. Hope that was useful. In the meantime, go make some tunes.